Haven't lost anyone yet, so that's great. Or maybe I should switch to Australian, because our first speaker is from Australia, although I believe born in Sri Lanka. So we're going to turn, first of all, to out-of-home advertising. I wonder how many ads we see every day. According to some studies, it's an incredibly large number, perhaps even as much as 10,000 ads a day that we're seeing. But seeing is one thing. Paying attention to them is another. Of course, we can't possibly pay attention to so many ads. We wouldn't be able to function, would we? I don't know. What is exactly the neuro impact that all this advertising is having on us? Well, to give us the answer to that question, it's a great pleasure to have with us Charmaine Moldrich. She is the CEO of OMA and MOVE. Charmaine, welcome. Looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us about the neuro impact of out-of-home advertising.
Thank you. Buenos dias, hola, hello. Thank you for having me from so far across the world and down under to be here. I'm so impressed with you Spanish speakers because they don't use notes. Everyone speaks off the top, but I'm going to use notes. So please pardon me. This is what we do in Australia. So my name is Charmaine Moldrich. I am the CEO of the Outdoor Media Association, which is the peak industry body. I don't know whether you've got one here in Spain, for out-of-home advertising in Australia. So today, I'm going to take you on a journey into the subconscious. Rest assured, I'm not going to turn you into chickens and bring you up on stage. Instead, I'm going to delve into the fascinating neuroscience journey that we at the OMA have been on. And what it's done is given us a credible story to tell about out-of-home, as well as proving a few hunches that we had about our channel and actually about the new digital bits of our channel. So as marketeers, living in a very shouty, in fact we see 3,500 ads a day, very shouty, crowded and overstimulated world, we felt that we needed to take a different path, particularly as out-of-home was evolving and growing. We wanted to invest in research that considered our rapid digitization. So neuroscience to us was the obvious choice, giving us undeniable scientific proof from the source, deciphering what the brain registered as people went about their daily journeys. So our brains have 86 billion neurons, capable of making trillions of connections, more connections than there are stars in our galaxy. That fact always blows me away. So that makes our brains the most complex thing we know of. No computer has been invented or built that can model the human brain. It's simply too complicated. What's more, what we are... Oh, sorry. Where is my slide? Anyway. What's more, what we are more consciously aware of is just the tip of the iceberg. Most of our brain's activity belongs to the unconscious. So this unconscious plays a huge part in how we behave, what we perceive, how we make decisions, and how we lay down memories. In fact, what we know is that 95% of our brain is in the subconscious. Isn't that amazing? So we're only using 5% of our brains. So neuroscience is currently the only discipline that can measure the depths of this unconscious. To help understand why people do what they do, even if sometimes we don't understand what we do. Neuroscientists, for me, are the rock stars of the science world because they give us this unfiltered, unbiased, universal view of the world, a little bit like art, music, and literature. Neuroscience is backed by proof, and it interprets the human condition. We know what humans recall seeing is very unpredictable and often inaccurate, especially when recalling events after the fact. What we see and hear from our senses is not always what goes on in the world. In fact, there is good evidence to show that our senses lie to us. Take this image, for example. In this photograph, the strawberries are actually grey. What your brain is doing is using all the information it has stored, that strawberries are red, and it's automatically filling in the colour. So numerous experiments like this and convinced us that neuroscience was the only accurate way to measure people's responses, tapping into the brain as information is processed. It's long been argued that media buying is a mix of art and science, making neuroscience the perfect ally, measuring both the art, how advertising creative hits, as well as providing the proof on how science, regardless of what creative is showing, impacts buying decisions. So neuroscience takes the proof beyond ratings and metrics like reach and frequency and validates efficacy by measuring the impact of our channel. So where did we start? We started this neuroscience journey 8 years ago when we gingerly dipped our toe into the research pond. The study was modest as our budget was limited. The simple question we asked was, did our primal instincts kick in when we were outside our homes? Did our brains scan the environment in an active way as if we were traversing the savannah looking for food or watching out for possible danger? You never know when that mammoth's going to come and grab you, right? The tool we used to measure this was biometrics, and it's through skin conductivity. At this stage, this was the most advanced way of measuring arousal outside the lab. Our study was naturalistic, which gave us an accurate read on people's levels of arousal, which translated to how alert people were, both inside and outside their homes. Let me play you a short explanation on how our primordial instincts kick in when we're outside the home.
The human being comes in many shapes and sizes. Fortunately, their survival is born out of their intelligence rather than their physical prowess. Humans tend to live in large clusters known as cities. Historically, these range from smaller villages to larger, more densely populated towns built for the convenience of the group. For most humans, their daily habits consist of only a few things: eating, sleeping, and working, with the occasional attempt at reproduction. Every morning, herds of humans embark on a long, arduous journey known as the commute. They leave their nests and head towards communal towers known as offices. This painful process is endured daily to bring food home to their young. This, believe it or not, is how the humans hunt. Unknown to many, as each human steps outside, something truly marvelous occurs. Their primal instincts kick in. Being out of their homes and in the urban wilderness heightens their awareness and receptivity. Biometric research shows us they become 2 times more alert and likely to act on messages. For those trying to gain the attention of these humans, this knowledge gives them an undeniable advantage. Their large, colourful displays erected in outdoor environments are far more effective at communicating with the humans than the smaller digital displays viewed on screens at home. In fact, observing these humans shows they're 2.5 times more alert out of home compared to when spending screen time at home. As the sun sets and the horizon glows with the incandescent lights of the office towers, the humans begin their journey home. Tired and hungry, the commute is now harder than before, but they push on, knowing the weekend is not far away.
So overall, the findings showed us that activities undertaken outside the home, those in green, have a higher number of spikes than those in the home, except for those of you who do housework, which is, of course, an active task rather than a passive task, like sitting on the couch watching television. What the research showed was that we were more aroused outside the home and therefore more alert. The conclusion we drew was that an aroused and alert brain was more likely to be impacted by advertising than a passive brain. Our next foray into neuroscience was Look Up, a project which started from a moment of frustration, something I know we all feel in today's world, that our digital connections, while designed to free us, are actually constraining us. So this is, I think, a global... Do you feel like that in Spain, that we are using our devices too much? Yes. So we tapped into this global concern. And it really came into a head for me when I was stopped at a traffic light and a massive chattering of cockatoos flew overhead. And for those of you who don't know, cockatoos make this god-awful screeching riot as they fly over. And the sky was just filled with white and yellow cockatoos. I looked around and everyone was preoccupied. People were either on their devices or just in their cars. And not a single person other than me in this busy city was looking up. And I was shouting out of my car, "Look up!" And no one paid any attention. So I just became that crazy old lady with grey hair, shouting out of her car window, asking people to look at the wonderment before them. And to bring this campaign into life, we found world-renowned neural and systems complexity specialist Dr. Fiona Kerr. So Fiona has been working in this area for 40 years. She's really passionate about people and the wonders of the human connection. And she speaks very simply about very complex things that are happening in our brain. So here is Fiona at our Look Up launch.
People, when they have a problem, just take a couple of minutes, gaze out the window and suddenly have that aha moment. When you look up and out, you go into the daydreaming mode state, which is actually the state of abstraction. What you're allowing your brain to do is play, to cross-connect and to connect those things back up, not only in the pictures that they were, but also to make new connections. Human beings actually get interpersonal neural synchronization. So you start with your brain physically synchronizing with the other person when you're looking directly at them. But it's also why in societies we need to look up at each other, and we need to look out and dream and think and give our brains time to play and room to do those kind of wonderful things, because we really do change the way we think, the way we interact, and the way that we live.
So I hope you enjoyed that little video of Sydney, which is where I come from. And what's really amazing is that in this room, at this very moment, even though I'm from a different country, our brains have synchronized. Isn't that incredible, that without doing anything, with just me talking to you and looking at you, we have made a human connection and grown more brain. So Fiona's work offers this very simple solution to a very relevant societal problem, that our preoccupation with our mobile devices is actually affecting our brains, how we think, how we interact with others. It's changing how we cognitively function, so we are becoming more scatterbrained, more prone to lapses in memory, and more anxious as a society. Fiona's assertion is categoric, that something as simple as looking up and connecting grows our brains and makes us more focused, sharper, and less anxious. Fiona's research covers the gamut of human behaviour, and an example that she gave me that sticks with me is a study on the effects of screens on attachment between new parents and their babies. Because rather than looking into the eyes of their feeding baby, parents are now distracted by their mobile devices. This deep connection of looking into each other's eyes is not only an intimate moment, but it also is one that bonds the parent with their offspring and helps make neural connections for both the baby and the parent. Breaks my heart. While not being able to solve this sad but fundamental change in our society, what we could do was we could run a campaign promoting Fiona's thesis about growing more brain cells and forming connections by reminding people to just do something as simple as look up. And the campaign was simple. It ran for 4 weeks. It started with this one image of a person looking up with only the words look up. Then we added more complexity with website addresses and more images to hone in on contextual relevance, location, time of day. Dynamic video content was used in places where people spend more time, like office lifts, railway platforms, cafes and universities. And people called us asking, what are you selling? And we said, an idea, a pause, a moment from us to you to look up. Amazingly, we still get calls about look up. It certainly resonated. I got an email while I was here from a kid wanting to do a thesis on it and wanting to look at our research. So, you know, from a university in Sydney. So let me play you another short video on how the campaign was measured and its results.
That staring at our phones all the time is doing actually more damage than we realise, and that daydreaming and just looking up and actually at each other can change our brains, our bodies, our relationships and entire communities.
We're a social animal and we are hardwired through our whole bodies to connect.
So what we had learnt from these two projects was that people were more aroused outside the home and therefore more alert. Look Up proved that this receptive mindset can be engaged with a simple at-a-glance message that created a visceral emotional response that sparked conversations and encouraged behavioural change. What was left to prove was the conclusion we were drawing that an aroused and alert brain is more likely to be impacted by advertising. We knew if we proved this, we could transform our research into undeniable proof for brands. What we now needed was to qualify what we had learnt. Enter the neuro impact factor. Could we measure this active mindset and use its impact on the brain and see its impact on the brain? We wanted greater insight into how people engaged with our science, both classic and digital, and we wondered whether our digital science had an X factor. We had seen the results of studies undertaken by our members showing the correlation between movement and effectiveness, but no one had comprehensively qualified this into a metric. We engaged Neuro Insights, a globally recognized neuroscience firm who had conducted advertising research across all media channels. More specifically, they had a vault of out-of-home research, including the effects of iconic sites, priming effects, frequency, sequencing, content movement, and much more. Their neuroscience research was media agnostic, based on the premise that while every channel works differently, the one thing common across all media channels is that an ad must walk through the doorway to long-term memory to be effective. Everything Neuro Insights had learned from across the media spectrum, they ploughed into this project. What we wanted to prove was that this active mindset could be impacted at a glance by outdoor advertising. The methodology was backed by extensive scientific validation and peer-reviewed. The findings correlate research results from other researchers, including Ritson, Ehrenberg, Bass, Binet and Field, and the American Research Foundation. Everything aligned on these fundamentals, that memory and emotion are crucial to driving impact and effectiveness in advertising. Memory in this context is long-term memory encoding, the storage of experiences as they occur in the moment. This is very different to what you might recall at a later point. What I found really interesting about this research was that our brains doesn't store information chronologically. Our brain stores information that it deems necessary for the future. So what does this mean for your brands? If brands want to be part of a customer's future, then your brand message must get into long-term memory. Memory encoding or mental availability is the cornerstone to effective advertising. Memory encoding is strongly associated with emotion. That's why emotion is a common feature of many profitable advertising campaigns. We talk a lot about emotional advertising, but that doesn't mean reflecting emotions back to people. It means being vivid, visceral, conjuring feelings, not just displaying or montaging them. A very apt definition from an Australian strategist, Alison Tilling, talking about emotion in advertising. And what's more, the data substantiates this. In The Long and the Short by Binet and Field, you see how emotional campaigns in blue have a far stronger payback than their rational counterparts in green, especially over the long term, which has also been proven by this well-used priming chart. So you see the rational messaging in the short term is giving you short-term sales, but the long term, you can see the blue line, builds sales over time. So, you know, the emotional is priming your brand, whereas the short term is selling your product, but only in the short term. While it might seem surprising to some that a glance medium like out of home can build emotion, the research absolutely supports this. Whether you cognitively feel it or not, your subconscious still emotionally responds to it, triggered by life events and details recorded to memory, fueled by emotion. This is a vital building block to advertising effectiveness, or mental availability, or the probability that a customer will notice, recognise, or be nudged ever closer to your brand in a buying situation. Let me play you a short video on the methodology and results from the study.
Years in the making, a nationwide study of everyday Australians going about their typical journeys. We studied 2,050 people and their interaction with outdoor signs across every format. Classic and digital, which amounts to over 1 million data points. We constructed video journeys as typical everyday experiences. Eye tracking determined when the person glanced at each sign, and the resulting neurodata reveals the moments that are encoded into long-term memory and the strength of the emotional response. The combination of eye tracking and neurodata provides a granular analysis of the passive real-time impact of out-of-home signs. Here is a typical response to a classic sign. The peak responses determine the power at which certain moments are encoded in the brain. We then looked at a response to a digital sign. We see an even greater neuro response. A digital ad triggers a 63% higher level of impact. Looking at the brain specifically, the impact of a digital sign is even more visible. Digital drives a higher impact on memory and emotion. The data shows that outdoor advertising's power and effectiveness can be quantified and used to plan campaigns. It's called the neuro impact factor. The neuro impact factor is an algorithm made up of memory plus emotion and is multiplied by peak moments that strongly correlates to real-world sales. In MOVE 1.5, both classic and digital will have a neuro impact factor, giving you a qualitative metric alongside reach and frequency to help you plan campaigns. Because now, with the help of neuroscience, we can measure when an ad is encoded to memory, providing undeniable proof of the neuro impact of out-of-home.
So let me just take you very quickly through three things that were in that ad, video. The first one is this chart. So the 0.7 is an internationally recognised mark where peaks. After that, you get emotional peaks. So both lines have to peak at the same time. So this is the response to a classic campaign, and you see 4 peaks. This is the response to a digital campaign, and you see 5 peaks here, which is why digital has that extra X factor or a higher neuro impact factor. And this chart I think is really interesting. So this is all of the brain science of all of the people that we measured, averaged out, and you'll see on the left the classic exposure is not as warm as the digital exposure. So why do we worry about these things? You know, what is this all about? Because it's this thing that makes iconic moments, such as Nike's Just Do It. So what this research tells us is that you don't need 30 seconds of dialogue and music. That isn't the only way to build peak moments. And iconic moments can happen at a glance. So can the neuro impact factor predict sales? You know, in the end, it's ka-chink, ka-chink at the till, right? So let me give you a quick example, because I know that you're standing there looking at me and I'm running out of time. So this chart looks at, so this is in the Neuro Insights Vault. Clients give them their econometric data to look at effectiveness. So this is the effectiveness of 15 campaigns. Each dot is one campaign and one creative. So on the vertical axis, what you have is the campaign econometrics. On the horizontal axis, and on the vertical axis, you've got the high neuro impact factor. So you see that line, the relationship, and the relationship is the higher the impact, the better the sales. So yes, ka-chink, ka-chink at the till. In fact, the number that they put on it is 86% correlation between a high neuro impact factor and sales. But quickly, coming back to the results that we saw, this is the range for classic and digital. We've indexed classic at 100, so we can measure everything next to that 100, and digital is 163, or 63% more impactful. Now, what happens to me is people say, oh yeah, that's great for out of home. What do the other channels look like? And this is what you see. So when you put it across with other channels, what you see is that in classic, you're getting a very good comparison. So It's sitting well within the range of a 15-second television and a 30-second radio commercial. And for digital campaigns, the average is even higher than ads on radio and a 15-second ad on television. Obviously, this is a huge game changer for our industry because we've been able to develop this into the first qualitative metric. It goes beyond attention to measure the impact advertising has on people who might not necessarily recall seeing the ad, but have been primed by it. So over the last 8 years, we've learnt a lot from neuroscience. Firstly, that you're 2 times more alert, and you're hardwired to be 2 times more alert. You can't get away from that. We concluded that this alertness meant that you had an active mindset when you were looking at ads. And then the neuro impact factor gave us the proof that these insights could be transformed into a metric that qualifies effectiveness. So that, my friends, is where we are at this moment. But it's by no means the end. We have got 3 projects. We have got 3 projects in the pipeline because we're very interested in neuroscience. Our aim is to find out more about what's stored in that 95% of our subconscious brain. While Elon Musk and Richard Branson battle over space, we here on Earth will be investing in finding out more about what lies beneath those trillions of connections greater than the stars in our galaxy in our unconscious minds. Thank you. And do I have time for questions?
You do. Thank you so much, Charmaine. Thank you so much. Well done.
Thank you.
That was fascinating. I wish we had longer, actually, because I think you were just getting going. There's so much interesting facts and figures in there. We have time for questions. We have about 5 minutes. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask? Yes, please. Can you just wait a second while we bring you a microphone? To think we're only using 5% of our brain is,
I know.
is just a frightening thought. Please, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know if you have made studies about the alertness that was increasing 2% when you are outside. Will it last when you are inside, or it is lost in just a second? I mean, could we be outside, for example, 30 minutes to get enough energy to then use it in front of our computers?
No, so it's because it's primordial. So it's you know, it's amazing that we're so modern, right? And we think we've conquered all of this stuff, but actually our brains are still working in that very primordial way, where the moment we step out of our cave, we're scanning. We're scanning. Is it a friend? Is it a foe? What is the danger? What am I going to trip over? What, you know, we're very active. You even see people who are on their phones, you know, doing this. Occasionally they will look up because you're aware of it. But if you see someone on their phone on the couch, they're kind of like this for ages, right? Because we're really aware of what's outside. Inside, we're very passive. We're home. We're comfortable. We built the fire. We're in our cave. There's nothing can get us. So unfortunately, you can't bank credits.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I was wondering, I can understand how being outdoors activates this primordial response and we become more alert. But as we move increasingly towards replicating that outdoor experience, perhaps in a digital way, for example, through the metaverse, when we have something that's much more immersive, will that not translate? Will we be feeling the same thing? Or does this really only work with the outdoor in the purest sense? Is it, I've got to feel the air on my face, or how would you explain that?
Yeah, look, that's neuroscience. I'm such a geek, right? And I spend a lot of time talking to Fiona. So one of the things that Fiona's working with is she's working with scientists who are screen-based to see whether we can get that visceral connection. So you know, all of us have been on Zoom. And we know that Zoom didn't work. It worked for some things, but it also exhausted us. Because what happens is, you know that I'm a friend, right? So I can come really close to you before you move away.
I'm moving.
Personal space. He's British, I'm Australian. So what Fiona says is that we're electromagnetic beasts. So at the moment, I'm exuding pheromones, hormones, electromagnetic. You know, when hippies talk about auras, that's actually our electromagnetics. So those two things are connecting. So our brains have synchronized. You're reading me, not just looking into my eyes and reading me and hearing my words, but you're also reading me.
Right.
So we're reading each other. You can't do that on a screen, right? You can't read people's electromagnetics. You can't feel the hormonal rush.
Not yet.
Not yet. So she's, well, I'm not sure ever, but she is working with scientists to see whether we can actually get that excretion. It's like sniff and smell. Does anyone remember sniff and smell at the cinema? Where you'd, you know, there were these sheets that you got and you scratch them and you smelled something like a fart.
You've been to some strange cinemas.
I know. I'm a bit strange. Look, I study neuroscience, so, you know, what can I say? So I think what, you know, one of the things that Fiona was saying about Zoom calls is we were never sure, so our brains were constantly going, is that a friend or a foe? Because we couldn't read other than what we were hearing, and especially when heads popped up and didn't say anything, there was not even the voice to read, right? So, you know, after Zoom calls, you'd feel really exhausted, and you'd feel exhausted because your brain was going, friend, foe, friend, foe, friend, foe. It could never kind of sit in a room comfortably thinking I'm talking to a friend. So, look, I love the idea of a brave new world. I don't kind of understand the reason for it, because this one feels pretty wonderful
that's another debate.
to me.
Yes, yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, but I think we show our age.
This one kind of feels cool that I got to travel across the world to come and talk to you guys when I could have done it on the metaverse. You know, there's something about this exchange that is important.
Well, you just wanted the air miles, I guess.
Those, and I wanted to see Madrid.
Okay. Well, we hope you have time for that, Charmaine. It's been a fascinating talk. I've really enjoyed meeting you, but unfortunately, I can feel the pressure from the other halls that we're taking place. Everything has to be synchronized. We really do need to finish. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.